Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. It's a real delight to be in conversation with you, Alex. As you all know, Alex engages millions of people around the world for environmental causes. This is an effort you launched out of your car five years ago, but your content educates millions of people. You've had a huge role in shifting public opinion. So over the next hour, we'll talk about your background, strategies, what really works, and in the last 20 minutes or so, we'll take questions for all of you watching. So let's start there. Let's start with your background. Help me understand the origins of your journey into environmental activism and content creation, and what's like a pivotal moment that inspired you to combine your passion for nature with digital storytelling?
Sure. Well, thanks for being here and being down to do this, and thank you to all of you for coming out and everybody that's watching online. I feel like it's important to emphasize how much of a community moment this is, and also how every single thing that has happened over the years is the result of so many people participating in community together. I don't think any creator can, I don't think we can really fully take credit for the things that have happened, because not only is it a achievement done with the viewers and the people online, but also so many other people that have made each of us the person that we are today. So I just want to shout that out, and also thank you all for being part of the little community we're putting together today. The main moment for me actually came during COVID, like it did for a lot of creators. There was a moment where I was hoping to go into the nonprofit realm and do that kind of work, but I had the pleasure of graduating right before COVID started. So I moved out to Colorado to try to get a job in the nonprofit realm after finishing an environmental degree. I picked up a part-time gig at a backpack store and was waiting to hear back on some interviews, and got let go after 2 weeks along with everyone else at the company, and wound up not being interviewed for anywhere. Everyone canceled their opportunities. And so I was sitting on that and thinking about it and being like, well, I kind of want to go out, live on the road. I've always wanted to do that. And I feel like that adventure could serve as a hook on social media to bring people into the conversation that might not be explicitly searching for climate and conservation topics, but they might like romping around the backcountry together, and then we can start the conversation there. So
at the outset, you were thinking in terms of how to capture what you were doing on social media? Yeah, from the very beginning. And it was a hunch, right? Like it was like, I feel like this could work. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just, when food stamps run out, pick out a job at a coffee shop wherever I end up.
Yeah. But it did wind up working, which is wild to think about. And now over 850,000 people follow the different platforms. And millions of people have participated in the different trends and campaigns that I've been part of.
Well, let's talk more about that, because you have been behind some of the world's largest environmental action trends on social media. So walk us through your specific process of creating a campaign that ultimately resonates with millions of people.
Yeah, I think after explaining this, it would be great to show an example in a video. But before we start watching the video, there are a few things I try to think about before deciding to pick up a particular issue and talk about it on the channel. Again, obviously, all of these are done in collaboration with people. And so every single campaign has nonprofit partners and others that do a lot of back-end work and on-the-ground work, participating in things. You'll meet a local activist that I've worked with in Louisiana in one of the videos later. But when I'm thinking about the social media side of things specifically, I wonder, first of all, if the issue itself has viral potential. So is it an issue that would resonate with people outside the industry online? For example, if we're talking about a specific bill in the House that's like HR, insert a few numbers here, no one's going to resonate with that. Like, that's not heartfelt at all. That's not something that people will be interested in, and you can't make that go viral. You can't make anything go viral. You can just give things the best odds of doing it. So I try to look out for issues and causes that are understandable to people outside the environmental community and industry, so that they can see themselves in it. Second, I wonder if there's a mechanism for action. So is there a way that people can participate that actually does have an offline impact on the particular cause we're talking about? If it doesn't, I don't consider there much point. I feel like we've raised enough awareness around most of these issues. The majority of people care about climate. The majority of people care about environmental health and nature. So we don't have to raise more awareness around that, as like that being the highest goal, I think is selling ourselves short. I try to find a way for people to take action because so many people want to take action now. So that's number two. Is there a way for them to take action? And do we know how that action will actually have an offline impact and drive policy, or is it something performative? If it's performative, it's out. The third thing is, because these spaces have so many players and so many people involved and stakeholders, are the people that are trying to accomplish what we and the viewers online recognize as a good thing actually cooperative? Or are they, is that coalition going to start to fall apart because of emotions that we all might succumb to as humans, like jealousy or envy, or trying to, like, will the people involved in building this trend ultimately try to capitalize on each other and take control of it, take control of these things that are ultimately public achievements and like community achievements across so many different levels? If that's the vibe at the onset of getting involved with a thing, then I wouldn't expect that to work, because you need cohesion to lead that many people in participating in what they're bringing to life.
And being able to decipher that certainly comes with experience. I imagine you weren't able to make those determinations early on.
No, absolutely not.
And what does taking action look like? What does that mean in a practical sense?
It can look like any kind of action. The most traditional one that we've been involved with is public comment periods. So encouraging people to write into the federal or state governments and submit an on-the-record public comment that has to be considered by judges and other decision makers in the process. If a ton of people do that, then there's potential for it to really flip or influence the way that a decision maker is thinking about something. A lot of people talk about petitions working or not working. We've seen petitions work. We actually just saw one work very recently in Michigan. When we know in advance that the important party is already interested in hearing from people and seeing the petition. So there are a few more examples of action, but the first video that we have queued up to show is actually about a situation going on in Michigan. It's the only petition that we've talked about in the channel, because the great people at a little nonprofit called Protect the Porkies knew that they were the people in the Michigan Senate were interested in seeing how many people would participate in the petition. They were considering that already. So if you see the video, it'll probably do a better job of explaining it.
Yeah, let's take a look at it.
NASA dropped a photo of Michigan from space, and it's interesting for 3 reasons. You can see the fall foliage. You can see how farming practices and fertilizer runoff could impact drinking water for over 1 million people. And one of the prettiest parts of the state is covered by clouds. That part of the state has a problem. Say hi to the Upper Peninsula. It sits between Lake Michigan and Lake Superior and is astonishingly beautiful. You can imagine that some happenings on the UP would affect the lakes to either side. If you throw trash on a beach here, it'll probably end up in Lake Michigan unless someone picks it up. That might be important for later. Now, Lake Superior is called Lake Superior because it's the uppermost lake. I like calling it Lake Superior because water flows from it to the other 4 Great Lakes. The lakes combined hold 21% of the whole world's fresh water. And underneath this cloudy spot is a little place called the Porcupine Mountains, a Midwestern treasure affectionately nicknamed the Porkies. It's filled with water and wildlife and beautiful forests. And a Canadian company is trying to build a mine here. The mine will reap 1.5% copper and 98.5% waste filled with heavy metals, operate for less than 11 years, and ship the copper out of the country. The waste, though, will keep on existing. And they plan to put it in a tailings pond about 2 miles from Lake Superior. The dam proposed to hold the waste back and withstand 1 in 100-year storms, and 2 1 in 1,000-year storms have happened in the surrounding area in the last decade. If the dam breaks, a 3-meter wall of toxic water will run toward Lake Superior and be there within minutes. Even if the weak dam somehow held forever, nearly all the copper sulfide mines in the US have contaminated nearby water sources. And mining like this tends to lead to lower employment and lower income for communities nearby over time, not to mention the drop in property value. However, the company is on the rocks, and they want the state of Michigan to give them $50 million in taxpayer money to build the mine. The Michigan Senate is about to vote on this, and they've taken interest in a petition going around to see how many people out there are watching. If Michigan doesn't give the grant, the mine will not get built. Anyone can sign, and you get bonus points if you're from Michigan. So grab a friend and sign the petition to save the beauty beneath those clouds. The link in my bio.
All right, so 2 questions.
Yeah.
The idea for that, an organization approached you and asked, what can we do? And that was the result?
I'd been watching Protect the Porkies for about a year at that point, because I filmed a documentary last year with the team that put it together is fantastic. But that was with REI in Patagonia. And while we were in northern Michigan for that documentary, heard about that issue because it's very nearby. And so I'd been watching it for a year and wanted to talk about it, but didn't have that second piece, that what's the thing that people can do to participate. And then they had the petition ready, reached out to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I love you guys, let's do this. So we put that together, got it out. The video now has over 11 million views across platforms. It got 10 of those within about a week and a half.
Really?
And over 400,000 people have now signed the petition from that specific video. 350,000 of them happened within the week. And about 2 weeks later, the Senate decided to drop the grant.
That's exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, woo.
So let's talk about the Protect the Arctic campaign.
Sure.
First of all, tell us about it, and then on the back end, what lessons you learned from it.
Yeah, the Protect the Arctic campaign was one of 2 campaigns around drilling in the Arctic done with a documentary group called Protect the Arctic. They're phenomenal. And there were 2 different goals for each campaign. The first goal was to prevent drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge during 2 administrations ago, and then leading into the previous administration. That was the first campaign that I was part of. That was the team that introduced me to the idea of impact production. And over 6.3 million people wound up writing in because of the trend. I really want to emphasize that it was the trend that led people to do that. That didn't happen through mine or any one particular creator's outlet. It's because thousands of different people saw the content, resonated with it, resonated with the story, and then decided that they were going to make videos about it as well and get the word out about it. That happened because we put a toolkit together with indigenous leaders in the region and distributed out to folks to be able to stand on their own business and within their own identities and have the resources to make videos that resonate, and it wound up working.
The fact that there is a known constituency and you make content with the constituency in mind, I imagine that's a key part of one of the most important strategies that you employ to have these campaigns that really work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What are some other strategies?
One of the strategies is assuming, one, that people won't care for the reason that you care. So again, emphasizing that, we're all here because we have a deep set care about this. We think about it a lot. It's very conceptual and heady. But if the goal is to expand a trend to be quite wide and allow for mass participation, it's starting where they're at. So there's hundreds of reasons to care about any one of these topics. And being able to open the door to as many of those as possible in the first communication and validate that reason to participate instead of saying, your reason's wrong, I care about this particular facet of it, and that's the reason you should be taking action, is a really great way to lose people and have them not participate in what you're up to.
That's interesting. So if I put solar panels on my house, I could be a climate change denier. I still want solar panels on my house for the cost savings. Mm-hmm. But your point is, the fact that you're investing in the solar panels is good enough to some degree?
I think so. I mean, if the goal is to open the door, if the goal is to get more people involved, I think we could get more climate action done if we set down the top priority of convincing people that it's happening. Obviously, that's an important value, and that's something that the world would be better off if more people believed in. But having that as the top priority and the main target and the main goal is going to lead to a lot more virtue signaling and a lot less actual climate action, because the person that is ultimately putting solar panels on their house for economic independence is accomplishing more than the person that is talking about the fact that they believe in climate change and not actually taking climate action.
Yeah. How does that land with some of the organizations that you work with?
People are generally open to it. Mm-hmm. when they see that it works. I mean, over the course of the campaigns, people end up caring more about climate and more about conservation and like realizing that those values are shared by most people and even within themselves. So I'd say people are increasingly more open to that idea of welcoming people in and then educating from there. It's certainly not across the board, but the people that I've worked with so far have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of off-guard ways to get people involved with something. Like the next video is a good example of a different approach to storytelling that also has resonated with a pretty large amount of people online.
All right, let's take a look at it.
So when you go for a hug for a girl, do you want their arms over, something like this, and your arms can go around their waist?
A tactical question deserves a tactical answer. I prefer when girls hug me around my waist because when they go around the neck, it implies they're going for a chokehold. You get out of this by pushing them back and dropping to avoid their punch. Then, sweep the leg, and while they're on the ground, grab your laptop and craft a well-written letter to save the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil drilling. Alternatively, you can do it on your phone. The link is in my bio.
So that was after like many videos like the Porky's one that have set and explained the situation. And at that point, it was just joke after joke after joke, and doing a stitch, which is like taking another person's video. That particular video was already going very viral with other people reacting to what she had asked with a fighting tutorial. And I thought it would be funny to then take that concept and flip it into action for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah. So the legwork of explaining had already been done for the viewers through other videos, and that one was just a off-guard way to let, if someone just wants to participate in because it's fun, that's great, hop in.
An idea like that, do you bounce that off of somebody? Do you have a team that you work with, or are you, as we saw in that clip, just in the woods and set up your camera, off to the races?
Yeah, no team. I mean, I have a manager and an accountant, but as far as like creative goes, it's just me. There's a lot of back and forth with the local activists that are most connected to the issue, because like, I mean, I live in Colorado, I care about these things, but the goal is always to like uplift and empower and make sure that the trend serves them and their initiatives in the best way possible and leaves the situation better than when we started. Yeah. And so there is back and forth on that to try to understand, make sure that we're aligned on values and that I get how to represent them in the way that they want to be represented. So all of that goes into the back end of what are either very informative, snappy videos or even just the goofy jokes. Like it's making sure that nothing ever runs aground into what they've built.
I want to return to this issue of impact, because as you said, you're focused on more than just the numbers. The virality of these clips is important, but you're focused on offline impact. How do you measure that? Petitions obviously are one thing, but if there's not a petition involved, how do you measure resonance?
Resonance can be measured through analytics online. So obviously you've got views, all of the other metrics like shares, comments, likes, whatnot, and then qualitative metrics like the comments that people are leaving. Are they resonant? Like we talked about earlier, if someone leaves a comment that's like, I usually don't agree with people like you, but this makes a lot of sense. Like that's like the gold star comment. I'm like so happy to see that because it's someone who's usually not part of these things starting to realize it means a lot to them and they want to have a role in it. So the metrics are pretty easy. There's also AI scraper software that you can use to bead how present an issue is all across the whole internet. That's a really great way to keep monitoring things when they go from trend to like trend on social media to trending in the news. Like when that conversion happens, you can get an aggregated view count across the issue everywhere on Earth. And that obviously is very compelling to decision makers and other people that are more interested in that way of thinking and decision making. But the ultimate goal is pretty binary. It's did we do the thing or not? If 10 million people participate in a thing, and at the end of the day, the thing doesn't happen, it didn't work. And that's a learning that we can take back and then incorporate into future things to make sure we take different strategies.
Yeah. As we discussed at the outset, you live a nomadic lifestyle for the most part, often immersed in nature. How has that personal choice influenced your work and perspective on environmental issues?
It's been genuinely wonderful to be able to spend that much time outside. I mean, I did it because I had to and wanted to, but it, I think, allowed me to spend time in a lot of places that I would never have gotten to see otherwise, and witness wildfires, witness different mining operations, realize that there are friends everywhere from all walks of life and different perspectives, and that no matter where we end up, or no matter where we might lie values-wise, we can connect and realize that we have a lot of shared values. I remember there was actually at that campsite that I was in for that video that we just showed, there was a dad and son who were camping nearby. I was there for about like 2 weeks. It was in the backcountry of Arizona. And they saw me out there and invited me to come to their campfire and just like have a drink with them that night and catch up. And he actually used to work in the oil fields of northern Alaska.
Oh, wow.
And so when we were talking about our pasts and what we'd been up to, it was interesting and validating to me and him to know that we both respected each other and shared a lot of the same values. Like, even though he came from that past, he also feels that there's a very, very urgent need to shift the kind of energy that we depend on and work with the environment in mind across all sectors. Mm-hmm. And so seeing that and having that moment just under the stars on a plateau in Arizona is like deeply impactful to me personally, and moments like that found the belief that everybody can be part of this, but it has to be a real belief and actual trust that everybody can be part of this. And I think that we collectively as an industry would resonate more if we actually believe that and are genuinely open to starting there.
Yeah. Talk about some other instances where your digital activism directly influenced either a change in public perception or actual environmental policy.
Yeah. There are a number of them. I think it would be best to show the next video we're thinking about here. And then I'll expand a bit more.
We're here at the IGN Bridge where the ethylene dichloride came with a deep disturbance that would cause havoc on the west side and the east side of the city of Lake Charles, Louisiana.
The bridge, which is super, super old, can't be repaired because the contaminants sitting underneath the water can't be disturbed. The bridge is deteriorating, the water is continuing to fill with pollutants. It's just a terrible situation. I don't know why we'd want to add more industry to this area.
When we got baptized at church, the preacher brought us down. They would sing the song, "Take Me to the Water," and they would dump you in the water and baptize you here underneath the bridge. They knew sooner or later they would have to address the issues that it had with the ethylene dichloride. They didn't really want the public to know about it. They said that they tried to contain it by putting something over the contamination, but they can't block that. We've had major hurricanes over here, number 4 hurricanes, very major hurricanes here in this area. We have them all the time. Some of them make it to shore inside the city. These waters right here that you're looking at, the laterals from those waters run all down around in the city of Lake Charles and Westlake around these people's homes.
I have the worst headache I've had in my entire life, and I've been coughing every day. This bridge goes up so high. If you start at the bottom of this bridge, the headache gets worse as you go up it because you start flying into the air that all the pollutants are in, and then as you come down it lessens a little bit, but you can feel the pollution inside your body and smell it in the air, the water. It's terrible. It's a horrible thing.
So that was in Lake Charles, Louisiana. That's Deborah. She's amazing. We still catch up on a regular basis, and she's like a grandmother to me now. But I spent about a week down there with her and several other Louisiana activists talking about the liquefied natural gas export terminal build-out that was kicked off and like making progress toward completing policy-wise during the last administration. That video wound up getting over 1 million views across platforms and leading a lot of people to participate in taking action, signing the petition to stop that build out from happening, saying that it's not in the public interest, largely because of the health concerns. There are several other videos like that one that I made with other activists in the area. And then because those videos were resonating so well online, I and several others of them had the opportunity to go lobby for the issue in DC. And again, like, this was not something that we accomplished on our own. This is absolutely something that activists in Louisiana put the vast majority of the effort into completing. And other people involved in the space politically put a lot of effort into making that achievement happen and like pushing that policy issue across the board. But it did wind up in getting a pause on LNG export terminals across the Gulf.
Really?
Yeah, unfortunately, this year that has spun around, and now we have to shift into a new headspace on how to think about it and how to continue that. But it did hold off that construction for an entire year, which is great. Yeah. So that happened. Obviously, the stopping drilling in the Arctic Refuge happened as well. There's been an enormous amount of effort around mature and old growth forests that have been involved in the last few years. That's encouraged hundreds of thousands of people to take action, and the videos have gotten millions of views on. And so a lot of these political wins happen because of the public awareness. Like, there is a direct correlation to the public taking action in large numbers, and then decision makers citing that as part of the reason why they decide to do what they do. Which is interesting because now that that's decidedly not happening, I wonder if decision makers realize the holes that they're digging for themselves by continuing not to listen to the enormous amount of support that environmental health initiatives have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm going to talk more about that in a second.
Yeah.
But first, I want to get back to this question of how you do this, because your videos are urgent, they're compelling, they're hopeful. How do you approach storytelling in this format to avoid climate doom, the sense of climate doom, while still motivating people?
Mm-hmm. I think one is, it really goes back to those three things that I mentioned at the beginning. If you have action that you know can work, it's very easy to build hope around that. I think so often the time is not put into figuring out what that action is. It's just put into imagining a brighter future, which is good and important, and that's where we start. But then at that point, people are told to have hope. People are told to like put on the face of hope when, especially online, it feels like the world is falling apart around us. And I used to have a podcast and spoke to a man named Andrea Crosta, who's the executive director of Earth League International. And we had a conversation about this exact topic on there, where he, I don't know if I would go this far. I respect his opinion that he had at the time, at least, which is a screw hope mentality. Like, I don't need hope because the planet and the people on it and the creatures that we share it with are considered my family. And you don't need hope to fight for your family. You just fight for them. Like, if something is threatened, you stand up and you fight for it. And I completely agree with that. Obviously, though, it's easier to do that and more fun to do that, and usually more effective if you can have hope as part of that process. And another thing that we talked about in that conversation was helpful to view through the lens of this metaphor, where if, say we're sick and we need a very specific medication and we know the kind of medication that we need. And the doctor comes in and gives us the wrong medication and then tells us to have hope and is constantly shoving the wrong medication into our faces. And we know that that's not what we need, and we know that it's not working. But they're so focused on like making sure that we still feel hopeful that that's the dynamic of the situation. That's an insulting thing to do. It's a really depressing thing to do. And I think that as far as communications goes in the environmental industry, that's what's happening, where creators and all of these more independent activist types are resonating very, very well online. But for some reason, the industry isn't entertained in, or isn't interested in really resourcing those initiatives, and is still focused on tactics that were effective a decade ago, like 2 decades ago. And so continuing to tie to those things is increasingly difficult for generations, now multiple generations, that see them not working as effectively. at least from a public comms perspective, as these more organic approaches to trend building. But when things are effective, the communities are really involved and can be really hopeful. And there's another video to show that can actually demonstrate just the level of hope that can come from maintaining that mentality and like giving people the agency that they need to participate in trends and make them their own.
Rocky Mountain! In 2023 alone, 4.1 million visitors to just this national park brought on $569 million to the local region. That spending supported over 7,000 jobs in local economies, 342 million in labor income, and $889 million in economic value added to communities around just this park. People from all walks of life are here, people across the political spectrum, other creators, and folks from all across the state of Colorado are coming out and turning out for their national park. This behavior is echoed by people in parks across the country at well over 130 other national park sites right now. There is so much support and solidarity for the people that are still on the clock right now. Letting go of federal employees is not the only decision related to public lands that has happened recently. The administration recently decided to roll back the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires them to notify you when an industrial project is going down in your area, requires them to take into consideration the environmental impact that a project will have, and requires them to ask you whether or not you want these things to happen. There are people challenging that in court, but if it ultimately goes through, you will no longer have a say in what happens to your public land. All of these people understand the same thing. There are two things that you can do right now. The first is call your representatives and specifically call them. There was an enormous amount of calls going into Congress, and it is genuinely encouraging them to make significant changes to the way that they've been handling our public lands. So call your representatives. The second thing that you can do is follow Resistance Rangers. I am not affiliated with them. They are their own entity and understand the implications of what these decisions are doing to our federal lands. They will be putting out information over the coming days, weeks, and months that you can use to stay up to date on things. Do not let this particular moment in history get you down. There is support for this on both sides of the aisle, over 70%. You are absolutely not alone, and the thing that you can do to make a difference is take action alongside Resistance Rangers. Keep it up, everybody. We've done good stuff before, and we can do it again.
You know what's interesting about that? That clip answered the question I was going to ask you next, which was, how do you avoid oversimplifying some of these issues for the folks who follow you? And that made very clear. I mean, the call to action was clear, but you were very clear in terms of laying out what the issues are.
Yeah, and you'll notice too, like obviously this initiative of like protecting public lands and trying to keep NEPA from disappearing, that video came out like 2 weeks ago. It already has over 1 million views across platforms, which is great. I didn't say climate in that video. That's not to say we shouldn't, but the number of people that resonated with is huge. And at the moment, this is a vibes fight, and so we have to bring good vibes. And I think that morale boost and that way of like laying out issues quickly but succinctly across multiple different, like most of the points in that video were economic, most of the points in that video were around the idea of personal freedom and independence and having a say in what happens. Those are more resonant topics and like reasons to care. And so as the first video of a well, not a first video of the movement, but the first video about the movement on my channel, I find it important to start there and then allow some of the other details of the situation to be brought into future videos as people are starting to buy into it more and align with it.
So in terms of our current moment, something like that, it's instructive to think beyond politics, think beyond specific politicians, and focus on the issues that have more buy-in. So for instance, to your point, everybody loves their national parks, so that's why you focus on the national park and less so on the climate issue, which can be, unfortunately, divisive.
Exactly, and if you understand that national parks as a concept, I mean, the Resistance Rangers are phenomenal. They're incredible organizers and fantastic people. And if you appreciate the fact that national parks are going viral, and we know that there's an enormous amount of public lands policy that has come out since then, is coming out, and will continue to come out, that's very, very negative, it makes sense to start there. Like, you're not gonna reach as many people by starting with this niche corner of government and land management that no one's heard about before. People love their parks. And if saving them also allows us to save so many more of the places that represent those exact same values, we might as well start there.
Yeah. I imagine not every video, not every campaign is a success. How do you deal with challenges?
Are there specific challenges you have in mind?
Just in general. So for instance, you start a campaign, and as you start to roll it out, you realize, oh, we should probably course correct. Mm-hmm. That could be one. Or you start a campaign and you realize the constituency isn't what you actually thought it was going to be. Or, as we've just seen in the last 3 months, events on the ground change the players, change the politics, change the overall atmosphere in which you're operating.
Yeah. I think that experimentation is a really great way to get over some challenges. It's exciting to be a short form creator in moments like this, because most short form creators didn't really change their approach after the last election. I mean, after some of the decisions that happened in the previous administration didn't go as expected or didn't align with people that participated in those trends and really cared about it, it wasn't necessarily a surprise that the election went the way that it did. And so a lot of creators maintained their approach, and their approaches continue to be effective in communicating with people. If a video doesn't resonate particularly well, then it only takes a short amount of time to make each video. So as we're learning how to talk about an issue, we've got whack after whack after whack after whack to figure out how that resonates with someone. And then when one does resonate, we have the opportunity to iterate on that and then start creating and crafting more and more resonant videos every single time. And so by the end of a month, you've put out 30 videos on the topic. Even if you've never been a creator before, one of them will likely pop off and go viral. Yeah. If you have the humility to understand that when you started, you did not know how it would best resonate, and you accept that every single time, then you get the opportunity to iterate to the most resonant version of the topic every single time you talk about an issue. So that's one way to help overcome the challenge of how to resonate with people. And then as far as overcoming the challenge of working against very, very moneyed interests that in some cases openly say they want the worst for you, that's a vibes fight. Like, it's like getting into community with people, staying in community with other creators, understanding that a lot of it is smack and isn't going to end up going anywhere, but also taking time to, get off the phone and get out into nature and spend time in these places that we care about, spend time with people like Deborah, other organizers that do phenomenal work, and reminding ourselves why we care about it. Because if we're constantly focused on that very intentionally difficult to bear diction, it's gonna be very difficult to bear. So separation is important from that, especially knowing that it's completely on purpose. So if we can take time to do work within ourselves and with others to bring a good vibe, then it'll be magnified and replicated across other people too.
A vibes fight. I like that phrase.
It's a vibes fight.
We have about 20 minutes left, so we're going to invite your questions. So if you have a question, either if you're in the room or watching remotely, submit your question on the app, and we will get to those. Alex, how can larger companies, larger organizations, brand managers put into practice some of what you've learned? And the other question I have is, you are in many ways the ambassador for this work. Many of your videos, you're talking straight to camera. If someone doesn't want to be on camera, if someone's an introvert, if someone has these great ideas, but they don't necessarily want to be the face of it, how can they be effective?
Mm-hmm. Well, to answer that question first, there's an enormous amount of resources out there for people that might not want to be on camera. A lot of the videos from trends that have gone viral have been from people that didn't want to be on camera and cut together a great edit of either using footage from toolkits we've put out. In some cases, stock footage is available online, and you can talk over that. So there are more anonymous ways to put out videos that are extremely resonant with people. It's been really, really inspiring to me to see a lot of those come from students. So people that, like me, wanted to eventually get into documentary filmmaking or storytelling in a more traditional sense and are now trying out short form because they see the way that it's resonating. To see one of their videos pop off and have them be really excited about the impact that they're having more than anything is very, very inspiring. So that's what I would say to people that are a little less comfortable being on camera. You don't have to start there and you can resonate regardless. As far as what companies, brand managers, large organizations can do, there's some specific things I've mentioned about like how to think about like prioritizing impact over everything. The audience is a really good meter for BS, and if a company feels performative, then they'll see that as performative. If a brand or organization comes across as, making a petition just to harvest data, then people are in tune to that, and that's why the conversion rates on forums like that are so much lower than the forums that we put out, because it's genuinely only used and only interested in getting people connected to the action so that it happens. But I think that not prioritizing impact as the top priority is digging a lot of companies and organizations into holes. And there's also, for some reason, this decided avoidance of working with creators at the front of the process. Creators and independent communicators are doing some of the best work in the industry right now around getting these issues to the forefront of public consciousness. It's often done in collaboration with groups, but the way that I've seen people working together is usually they come up with an idea they think will work online, and come from an honorable and traditional background of marketing and campaigning in ways that maybe didn't include social media, or maybe the organization's social media person is really on it, but they have to answer to a decision maker that doesn't use the apps. And so bringing people like creators in, actual practiced, creators with viewership into the strategizing process, and then building the campaign with them before just showing up and being like, hey, we have this campaign, can you talk about these 3 talking points and make it go viral? We all know why that won't necessarily work. And so you see a lot of these partnered videos being the lowest performers on the creator's page because they want to work with these groups, but they weren't brought in early enough. So I think bringing them into the process, funding communicators that are doing a good job, and not just looking at follow counts, but looking at viewership and who's getting consistent viewership across their platforms, I think will lead to really, really effective campaigns.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
We have some questions here. We'll start with this one from Anonymous. How do you think about monetization? Do you have a prorated X amount of dollars you make per video? Fellow creator here getting started. Thanks for the question.
I would love to meet you, Anonymous, and we can talk after this. I gave you more specific advice. But no, you don't make a prorated X amount of dollars per video. I mean, AdSense is all over the place, and it's not very high on TikTok, Instagram, other channels. So that is attributed to views, but even if it gets multi-millions of views, you don't get paid very much as a creator for those on short form platforms. And then I guess the short answer is basically if a group wants to reach out and work together, then it depends on what deliverables they're looking for. And then that's usually how the contract ends up getting set up, if it's a brand partnership or something like that. But very happy to talk to you after the show and give more specific advice for what you're up to, because it's really different creator to creator.
There's another question here. How do you choose? Oh, it just moved. Sorry, forgive me. Oh, here it is. How do you choose who to partner with and what issues to address with everything going on? Do you plan anything in advance, or do you wing it as you go?
There's a lot of room to wing it on purpose because these are, again, unfolding situations. That's another way that I think these large organizations, it's hard when you're working in a bureaucratic system. But all of these processes, and especially with public campaigning, it unfolds day after day after day. I mean, you know that as a news anchor, you can't plan the news a week ahead. And it's the same way with these unfolding campaigns. You can't necessarily plan updates a week ahead. You have to be reactive. So I like partnering with people on campaigns that are open to some improvisation and are trusting enough to understand that this has been done before, it's been done multiple times, there's good reason to have that space and to be agile. And as far as what issues to address, it'd just be back to those three things, like what's resonant, is there a method of action, and are the people in the space cooperative?
How do you handle misinformation, disinformation, negative feedback across platforms to some of the content that you produce? And what strategies do you employ to maintain credibility amid this online discourse?
Yeah. Credibility, I think, comes from the demonstrating the level of effort that we as storytellers put in to bringing the story to the forefront of things. I mean, obviously you see, I think one of the reasons that creators aren't quite as respected as some other professions is because they'll see a video like the fight video and be like, oh, that's representative of all the communication going on that platform about the thing, not realizing that it's part of a greater structure of multiple videos. But in the informative ones, you'll notice that every single source is cited. Obviously, it'd take a lot of effort or take a lot of care to make sure that I know the people on the ground that are most impacted by these things and working with them. So that's how I do it. And then as far as misinformation, people will remember the thing that they hear first. So if you say, this is wrong, so don't listen to it, this is the right way to think about it, people will remember the wrong thing. Like they'll associate the issue with the topic that you're talking about and the falsity with the issue that or with the topic that you're talking about. So don't let that happen. Like don't let people see the untruth first. Mm-hmm. If it's in the comments, I usually just get rid of it. If it's intentionally hateful or inflammatory, then there's no time for that and they get removed and blocked. But for us, the best way to combat misinformation is to just not give it the time of day and lead with the topics that we know to be true. Especially when you're pulling viewership, you can let the smaller videos kind of fall to the wayside, because if you can make a video that becomes the front runner of the campaign, then it doesn't, that's the message that most people know. That's the narrative most people receive.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always say the antidote to disinformation is putting more good information into the world. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely on the same page there. There was a question here from Brian Grogan. Which brands have the most potential for collaborations, sponsorships for climate content creators?
I think right now, this year, it's the brand that does it first. Like right now, there's an enormous amount of brands and companies that are scared. The reason that the Resistance Rangers campaign is doing so well is because it's one of the only groups in the space that's actively talking about things right now in a way that resonates with people. And the timelines that I've seen from brands and philanthropic organizations and that sort of, like people that want to be in this and have the resources to be in this, the initiatives aren't starting till summer, fall even. And you can think of the damage that can be done to the world we call home and the social situation we find ourselves in between now and summer, or now and even May. And so I think at the moment, as far as climate content creators go, I can't answer that in like your particular vertical. I would maybe look in like adjacent verticals and see if there are any other brands that might share your values but aren't necessarily explicitly climate to partner with, because they're the ones that are ready and willing to partner right now. But as far as brands looking for opportunities to partner with people, the door is pretty open right now. And the first brands that decide to start taking a stand for this stuff will be adored. We've seen that so many times in like recent weeks. Like Patagonia, for example, made a post about public lands like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, after radio silence from so many groups, and were very, very celebrated for it. So if you're nervous about doing it as a company or a brand manager, people will love it. Like it is not as divisive as one might think, and especially if you lean into the ways to handle misinformation that we talked about, there's a really great opportunity to do that right now.
Here's a question from Lorita Garza. How do you balance authenticity with the need to optimize content for social media algorithms?
There's another video that we've got on the docket that I think might work for answering this question, but I always try to, assume that people don't just want to have heady conversation the whole time and learn facts and figures, but genuinely want to have fun and like get out into places and like make memories together on social media platforms. So throwing those in and opportunities to do that online help me feel myself, help the audience feel themselves, and also ends up boosting the library of content overall.
What is the #1 thing that you want to change now?
I wonder actually if we could show that video that I mentioned.
Let's go back to the video.
And then we can get to that.
We're on top of the world. And that is a wildfire. It's already massive. One last goodbye. Woo! Made it up. Bye to our lovely home. Now the real journey begins. That's where we were. And the smoke plume from this morning has covered the whole area. When we saw the smoke this morning, we thought that the wind might shift and we wanted to beat the wind out of here. And there it is. The wind has shifted. So now we're racing the smoke out of the forest.
There's a point that a really, really great editor named Hayden Hillier-Smith, he's a friend of mine, made in conversation that it's our job as creators not to make videos, but to make memories for people. I think that's a good example of a memory in the palm of one's hand, like to suddenly be having that experience that intimately and that close for someone that's never been through being near a wildfire before, I think humanizes it and like makes it a more resonant topic for them. And then that can be expanded obviously to the whole idea of a campaign where it's like, oh, we did this together. You remember participating, you remember seeing it play out. And so that's something that I always try to keep top of mind is how do we not make content, but make memories for people where they remember being there and participating in it.
That's great. The question, what is the #1 thing you want to change now? And I would add to that, if you had unlimited resources for a single climate initiative, what would it be?
I think the biggest one right now is genuinely, I mean, it's such a through line across all the content and within the community, but at the moment, it is public lands and waters, and specifically doing that in a way that incorporates land back and incorporates indigenous leadership, but resourcing these mitigative strategies that are also helpful for our mental health, are also helpful for climate, are also helpful in like dialing back fossil fuel infrastructure. I think that specifically is the thing that will allow this particular country, which is kind of the keystone country when it comes to like dialing back climate change as best as we possibly can. That is the thing that I want to change now and think could have a really, really big impact and bring a lot of people together around.
How do you see the future of digital media environmental activism unfolding?
A lot of it's happening on short form. I think it'll play into short form pieces. I think it'll become more real, like less theoretical concepts and more people out on the ground showing things that are happening around them. I mean, we see that anytime there's any disaster, but we also see it anytime there's a good thing. People doing more videos like the one at the rally and being like, you're now here on your phone with me at this place, experiencing this thing alongside me. I think that that is going to continue to grow as a wave of digital activism. And then more splintered and semi-anonymous organizing is working really well too, as up-and-coming environmental activists are keenly aware of the dangers that come with talking about these things and talking about them in a way that's creative, that delivers the message and kind of goes under the radar of a lot of people that might be hyper-aggressive about these topics in various ways.
Well, how should creators think about their own agency when they take on these deeply entrenched interests?
I think first is to turn to other creators that have been doing it for a while. There's this, the creator industry is very cooperative and very helpful generally. Some people view it as a competitive thing, but for the most part, creators are really excited to have other creators in the space and like I remember living in my car and trying to get it off and started, and most other creators have a similar story where they're just trying really hard to make it a thing. And so when someone's excited to participate and excited to get involved, then there's a lot of help available for you if you're a creator. And I would not, don't take offense to someone not replying to your DM. The best way to reach out to a creator that you look up to is over DM and then email specifically. Most people have their email very available, and for some reason no one uses it and then gets mad when we don't respond to a DM, and it's like, oh man,
Email's
I
almost
saw it.
analog these days. It's,
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
A telegram too, that always works.
Carrier pigeon,
Yeah.
whatever it takes.
But another thing I would say is, and it ties into a story that I love sharing, is to stand in your personal experience and identity. That resonates so much more than facts and figures resonate. Obviously you can tie those in, but the one thing that no one online can disagree with is your truth and your lived experience. So if you're a creator trying to get the word out about these things that you care about, start with where you're at. There's in the first Arctic campaign, there was a 8-year-old from West Virginia named Rory. This is my favorite story. It's the Rory story. He messaged me every day. I never replied, but he sent a message every day being like, Alex, what's the latest? Like, I'm so fired up about protecting the Arctic. Like, what could I do to help? And like commented on everything, like showed up in every single live stream. He's an elementary schooler in West Virginia. And eventually, after weeks of that, he shared that he had asked his teacher to make writing a letter extra credit, who then told it to his whole class. They did it, and then the teacher took it to the teacher's lounge. They all did it together. And then after that, the entire school and group of people wound up like sending in a letter. Hundreds of people participated. They took it back to their families, and they all participated. And Rory, at hip height, had a bigger impact than, you know, insert organization here that's having their 19th meeting about how they can start talking about making an impact. Like, he really just stood in the identity that he has and he believes in, and just took a chance on himself and brought it to his teacher, and then wound up getting hundreds of people to participate in a thing that ultimately worked. So if you're a creator trying to figure out how to resonate, I would just lean into who you are and be honest about that, because it works in every venue.
I was going to ask you what keeps you motivated, but I would imagine stories like that. I mean, Rory's all across the country. Keep you committed to this work?
Absolutely, yeah. And increasingly as I get older, it's Rory's and kids. Like, there was a high school club leader, a senior in high school, that reached out and asked if I would come talk to their club on Zoom. And it was so inspiring to hear the way that they're all going about life and thinking about bringing these initiatives into their spaces. It's exciting too to see people resonating with these stories that I'm not necessarily a part of. Like, the Rory story resonates more with decision makers than a lot of like 90-page briefing booklets, you know? It's things like that, seeing people that haven't interacted with it before lighting up when they realize they can help change the world in a good way, seeing young students do the same thing, and just anytime someone's leaning into their identity and speaking to what they believe in, it's deeply inspiring to me. So, yeah.
And this will be our final question from Sonia Zabo. What are the plans for the future of Alex Harris Media? How do you envision your organization developing and changing over time? What's next for you?
Yeah, the plans for this year are to grow the media production capability, because we know how to do it now, and it's just a matter of scaling. Obviously, we're very good at scaling issues. I say we, like there's multiple people involved in this. Like,
one-man band.
Yeah, understand how to scale issues, and like have done that with multiple organizations and partners and friends now. But this year, I'd like to bring on a team and then do that consistently more often over the course of a single year, especially knowing the approach works, knowing it's replicable, not only for us to do it and do things that we're passionate about, but to continue setting that example for other people. Like, I'd want to be outpaced as soon as possible by many classes of other activists that are like taking that and running with it. So this year, the goal is to talk on more issues, build out a team, and lean a little bit further into long form, specifically on YouTube, working with sponsors to put together deeper dive pieces that inform the really passionate activists, organizers, and people at brands and companies and organizations that might want to take action and understand it on a deeper way. Yeah. So just more videos.
Terrific. Well, Alex Harris, you are doing important and impactful work. It was a real treat to be in conversation with you.
Thanks
for your time. And thanks to all of you for spending part of your afternoon with us. Thank you.